Welcome into our CBS Sports HQ studios here in Fort Lauderdale, and welcome to those of you who are watching West Virginia take on number 9 Kansas on CBS. I'm Jeremy St. Louis. Despite the spread coming in, Jayhawks head coach Bill Self said he expected a tough battle here against the Mountaineers. It looked tough at halftime. They were only up by 2. And the Mountaineers, of course, one of the better defensive teams in the Big 12, but as it turns out, they go down 85-59 to the Mountaineers. Kansas, led by Jalen Wilson, 23 points and 8 rebounds. Ochai Agbaji had 20 points and 7 boards. David McCormick, according to the double-double, 19 points and 15 rebounds for him. Jalen Bridges had a double-double in a losing cause for the Mountaineers. He had 12 points and 11 rebounds. So KU covered the 11.5-point spread, and the over hits at 144 after the 26-point victory. And let's now welcome in our guys from the Eye on College Basketball podcast, Matt Norlander and Gary Parrish. They're also two of our college basketball writers on CBSSports.com. Matt, Kansas head coach Bill Self was preparing for a tough game. And as mentioned, it looked tough at halftime, 33-31, but they managed to pull away in the second half and get a pretty good win here.
Yeah, there have been a couple of indicators and results around men's college basketball on Saturday to give us an idea that there might be some traditional powers that really have some high-end capability, and Kansas is one of those teams because through the first 20 minutes of this game, it looked like West Virginia was going to be able to keep it competitive. And I even thought to myself, we talked about this in pregame, Bob Huggins had never won, still has never won at Fog Allen Fieldhouse. So I thought, well, maybe this might wind up being the day. Not the case whatsoever. What an impressive, dominant, beat them down showing in the second half by the Jayhawks. You know, Taz Sherman, who's West Virginia's most important player, he didn't get his first field goal until there were 5 minutes left in this game. A couple other guys were able to eat, but Taz Sherman has to be a factor. Credit to Kansas for turning up. David McCormick, let GP talk in just 1 second here. He told you in the pregame McCormick was the guy to watch. And certainly he wound up being a huge factor. I saw this on the broadcast. This is wild. McCormick had 15 boards. 10 of them were offensive. It was the most offensive rebounds in a game by a Kansas player since Jeff Graves in the 2003 national championship game against Syracuse. That blows my mind. So big time win for Kansas, which I still think has Final Four potential. Been a little bit up and down recently, but I thought this was a pretty definitive and loud win considering the other guys you need to play well. Ochai Agbaji, Jalen Wilson also showed well here on Saturday.
Really impressive victory. You know, it was a close game at the half, and I thought if you're Bob Huggins, you got to feel pretty good about it because Taz Sherman, you know, his best player was 0 of 8 from the field in those first 20 minutes, and still West Virginia was only down a couple of points. Again, if you're Hugs, you feel good, and then the second half, it just got completely away from them. You know, they were outscored by 24 points in those final 20 minutes. Sherman only finished 1 of 9 from the field, and David McCormick and Jalen Wilson just absolutely tore up West Virginia. And that's a good sign if you're a KU fan because we talked about McCormick in the preseason. When you get a big performance like this out of him, that's super, super encouraging. Jalen Wilson, we didn't talk about in the pregame, but he's had a disappointing season. Only 6 points and 6 rebounds. That's what he's averaging so far entering this weekend. That's way down, at least from a points per game perspective, than what he was at last season. So to see him come out and post the kind of numbers he posted, and McCormick go 19 and 15, that means he's got 2 15 and 15 games in his past 4 outings. Super encouraging if you're a KU fan. We know what Ochai Agbaji is at this point. An All-American candidate, possible National Player of the Year candidate. It's the other guys that Kansas needs to be good for them to be great. Today they were really good and Kansas looked great.
Yeah, Kansas holding West Virginia to 28 points, outscoring them 52-28. In that second half. So, Matt, looking ahead, Kansas have Oklahoma on Tuesday, K-State next weekend, both of those games on the road. What kind of opportunities do those 2 games present before they play, as of right now, 3 straight ranked opponents?
Right. Well, I think those are both winnable games, and K-State was able to get off the mat finally, took advantage of a home game against Texas Tech. Texas Tech dropped earlier in the afternoon on Saturday there. But those are both winnable. And I would say, big picture to your question, Jeremy, if Kansas is going to be that top-end Big 12 team, which I think we believe it will be, and that Final Four contender, I think it uses this game as a springboard. But McCormick's reliability on a night-by-night basis, I think, is becoming if not the most important thing about Kansas going forward, one of the like 2 or 3 most important things. If you can get, now we cannot expect them to have 15 and 15 nights every other night, every 3 nights. That's too high end. Frankly, the only one you can expect that from might be Kentucky's Oscar Tshiebwe, who literally is averaging that. But if you can at least get a bit more consistency there, it really high end stuff, high end potential for Kansas. So I do expect KU. Before the schedule gets a little bit tougher again. It's the Big 12. All the games are tough for the most part. But before it really gets like high-end tough, I think that Kansas will win its next 2 and reestablish itself in the general hierarchy of men's college basketball.
West Virginia came into the weekend 13-2. They fall to 13-3. And things don't get easier for them, Gary. They've got 6 ranked opponents in their next 8 games. What about this result and how it looks for them as you spin it forward?
Obviously not encouraging. You hope those final 20 minutes inside Allen Fieldhouse are not representative of what West Virginia is capable of against great teams going forward, because if so, they're about to lose their next 2. I'm not predicting that. I'm just saying they're going to have to be much better, obviously, if they want to avoid a losing streak. Like Norlander said, this is kind of life in the Big 12. Iowa State right now is in the middle of a string of games, 6 consecutive Quadrant 1 opportunities. On one hand, whoa, what an awesome opportunity to build a big resume. On the other hand, you could lose them all. And, I think Baylor is probably going to be able to avoid lengthy losing streaks, Kansas as well. Everybody else in the Big 12 is going to be susceptible to 2-game, 3-game, maybe even 4-game losing streaks. So if you're a fan of one of those programs, you just got to take a deep breath, a big gulp, and get through it. It doesn't mean your team's falling apart. It just means your team's playing in the toughest conference in America.
Yeah, they play number 1 Baylor coming up on Tuesday, although Baylor might not be number 1 at that time. They are CBS Sports HQ college basketball writers Gary Parrish and Matt Norlander joining us to discuss the Kansas-West Virginia result as Kansas rolls the Mountaineers by a big score. All right, you can hear more from both gentlemen as they discuss this game and other big games this weekend on the Eye on College Basketball podcast. We're still weeks away from March Madness, but as Matt has said repeatedly, every game means something when the calendar turns to January. Download and follow the Eye on College Basketball podcast wherever you get your podcast audio.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.